everybody? My name is Patel, and I am pumped to start this series called The Quarantine Life. And today is part 1 of The Quarantine Life, and I've titled it Permission to Grow. Permission to Grow. Now, the reason I even titled this series Quarantine Life is because, well, we're in quarantine life right now. We are in a season where we are all experiencing something very similar, and we're all, even physically, are staying at home, or you're at your shelter in place, and we're going through it, right? And so I wanted to give a message to you that I feel like God was maybe speaking to me, and God has been speaking to me during this time, but I think I wanted to give a message to you and encourage you in this time. And so today is part 1 called Permission to Grow. Permission to grow. Isn't it interesting how in life sometimes we need permission for things, right? We need permission, like when you're a kid, you need permission from your teacher to go to the restroom. As you get older, you need permission from your parents to go to Joe Schmo's house, right? Your buddy's house, right? Your friend's house. And, we need permission, right? And, with God, He is our ultimate authority, and we look to Him for permission. Now, we tend to look at permission as something like negative, like if I'm the adult in charge and you ask me for permission, it's like I'm almost like made out to be this bad person like that I'm withholding something from you maybe, and so you come in and ask for permission or whatever. But I think in God's case, in our relationship with God, God is the one who sets the standard for all things, right? God is the one who orchestrated the whole world, meaning he's the one who created the whole world, right? We live within His parameters, right? And every time we step outside those parameters, it's called sin, right? And He doesn't want us to do that because it produces things that we don't like to experience. And so when we live within His parameters, we are experiencing what God desires for us to experience, which is life and peace and goodness and love and joy and kindness and all of these things that we see in Galatians chapter 5, the fruit of the Spirit. And I think we, at times, as we're walking with Jesus, are reading the scriptures, are, in our communities of faith, we're talking to our friends about Jesus and how we're walking with Him and how we're growing, and, we're listening to our pastors and our parents and our elders and all of these things, our church leaders, right? And sometimes, at least I know for me, I forget that I am in a process of growth. Now, we talk a lot about our identity at Grace Life Youth, right? We talk a lot about our identity, right? Our identity is never changing. It's fixed. It's because of Jesus, because of the cross, right? I say that a lot, right? Because of the cross, because of the resurrection, we have this brand new identity. And I get that from the Bible. I'm not just making that up, by the way. And so we talk about that a lot, right? And we talk about how we're accepted. We talk about how we belong. We talk about how we're loved always. We talk about these things that mean so much to us. And if you're like me, you forget that, hey, all of these things are true. And at the same exact time, while they're never changing, at the same exact time, you and I, we're growing in that reality. What do I mean by that? Well, the truth that we're accepted will not change. Does that mean that you and I will always believe that in any given moment? Maybe we're, in this quarantine life and we feel a little isolated from our friends. We feel alone at times. We feel separated from things, right? And that's a normal experience, by the way. But we tend to forget that, hey, we're humans and we're learning to trust God more and more and more. And, we're growing. We're growing. And in order for us to believe these truths, we have to give ourselves permission to grow. God gives us permission to grow, meaning He doesn't expect us to understand all things all the time, like even right now. He doesn't expect us to understand the depth and weight of everything. Of course not, right? When I'm thinking about Jesus, when I read the Bible and I'm looking at the crowd that Jesus hung out with, man, Jesus hung out with a bunch of dudes who were kind of like misfits, They were misfits. They didn't fit in these pretty neat little boxes that sometimes society likes to put us in, right? Oh, you go to church, so you must act and believe this, and you must think like that. Oh, you don't go to church. Oh, you must think like this. You must act like this. And so because like we in society, oh, you're not popular. Oh, you are popular, or whatever, right? We tend to put these people in boxes, right? And Jesus's crowd, his 12, they didn't really fit into boxes. And so he knew what he was getting when he chose the 12, and then when the 12 decided to follow him, right? Meaning he was getting some guys that had this deep passion for God, but they didn't really understand and know God. And if you look at the 3 years, if you look at these stories in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they didn't always get it all the time. They were wrestling and struggling just like how you and I don't always get it. And Jesus knew that. Jesus wasn't upset with them because they didn't understand perfectly, right? He did sometimes call out their faith, right? Because Jesus knew what he was getting. Just like how when Jesus died on the cross, he died for the whole world. He died so that the gates of heaven might be open to every single person, no matter where you come from, no matter what your past church experience has been like, or if you've never been to church, it doesn't matter. Jesus says, hey, all are welcome in my presence. And so Jesus knows what he's getting. He's going to get people that have just had crazy experiences in life, right? They probably have done some terrible things in their life, or some terrible things have happened to them, which has caused them to not trust people, or to not believe in people, or to not trust themselves, or trust their parents, or trust their friends, or stuff like that, right? And that is a place where we can relate, right? We are growing in our trust of people and of God, especially people who care about us and people who love us, and our God who cares about us and who loves us. And I want to go to this person in the Bible named Peter. Now, I've talked about Peter a few times. You know about Peter a little bit, maybe not. That's cool. If you'd have no idea or no recollection of anything like Peter, Jesus, whatever, it's cool. You're still welcome here. And I still think that this message is for you. I still think that you can be encouraged by this. So if you have a Bible, I want you to go to the book of John. And in the book of John, I want you to go to chapter 18, verse 15. Now, let me just kind of set the stage of what's going on. Jesus is about to be led to the cross, and he's kind of in that. This is a scene where Jesus gets arrested, and Peter is one of Jesus's closest buddies, one of his closest friends. And then Jesus tells Peter, hey, you're going to deny me 3 separate times. When asked about me, when the pressure is on and the heat is turned up, and somebody asks you about me, and you're going to deny me 3 times. You're going to say you don't know me, when in fact you do. Jesus tells them this in advance. Peter had no idea really what he was talking about. And he probably didn't even believe him. Peter was a guy who was zealous. Zealous means passionate. He's very passionate about God, right? If you read the stories about Peter was a guy who said that Jesus, you are the Christ, right? When Jesus is asking his buddies, they're all like huddled around, and Jesus asks his buddies, he says, hey, who do people say that I am? And some people said, oh man, you're Elijah, a prophet. Some people said you're John the Baptist. And then Jesus asked, but okay, who do you say that I am? And Peter says, you are the Christ. You are the Son of God. And then, it's almost like this, wow, like Peter's the one who got the answer right. He said that Jesus is God. And then Peter's also the same guy who denies Jesus. He's also that type of guy. He's zealous. He's passionate. He just doesn't understand what he's passionate about yet. He just doesn't get it yet. But you know what? It's cool. You know why? Because Jesus was totally okay with with Peter's growth process. Jesus was totally okay with Peter's growth process. He gets it. Jesus gets it. And I want to take us to the story, and then we're going to fast forward a little bit to this ending scene, which I think will really encourage us. Check this out. John 18, verse 15. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood outside at the door. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the servant girl who kept watch at the door and brought Peter in. The servant girl at the door said to Peter, "You also are not one of this man's disciples, are you? You also don't know Jesus, do you?" He said, "No, I'm not." Now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing and warming themselves. But Peter was also with them, standing and warming himself. Let's fast forward a little bit. Verse 25. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. So they said to him, "You also are not one of this man's disciples, are you?" So they asked him 2 times. He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off. You probably are like, okay, what's going on? Well, right as Jesus was getting the cuffs laid on his hands by the officers, by the officials, Peter, in his passion, in his zealousness, he said, "You ain't gonna do that." And he got a sword and he chopped off an ear of a servant, right? And this was, you got to go back and read the story, but that's the context of this story, okay? And so one of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Peter again denied it. And at once a rooster crowed. Now Jesus said, "Hey, you're going to deny me 3 times. This is before the story that I just read to you happened. Jesus told Peter, "You're going to deny me 3 times and a rooster's going to crow. Watch." And so there it is. He denies him 3 times and the rooster crowed. And so if you look at all these things, Peter was with Jesus, right? So basically he lied. Not basically, he did lie. Peter lied 3 separate times. And he denied that he was with Jesus. He denied any recollection of him. He didn't even know him. He's like, "Who is this man? Don't talk to me about Jesus. I don't know no Jesus." Yeah? Can you and I think, relate to that sometimes? When I'm with people who don't know Jesus, when I'm hanging around people who don't know Jesus, and they start talking about religion and faith and God, there's something within me that just wants to not have a conversation like that. There's something within me that says, I don't want to talk about Jesus because I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to be the only person who really believes in Jesus in this circle, and that makes me kind of weird, and it makes me kind of awkward, and I don't want to talk about faith right now. I don't want to do that. Right? I don't know if you've ever felt that pressure, or you've been in a situation or in a circle of people like that, but I have. And I'm telling you, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. And those thoughts begin to knock on the door, and I'm like, man, I really don't want to talk about this right now. And so Peter was kind of in this situation, but on a much larger, more intense scale, right? Because if he would have admitted that he was with Jesus, then Peter would have been arrested too. And who knows what would have happened to Peter, right? When Jesus got arrested, all of his disciples, his gang of 12, dipped out. They left, right? And Peter would have been in trouble just like the rest of them if they had stayed and said that, hey, I follow Jesus too. So Peter didn't want to get in trouble. So he said, no, I don't know him. Okay. And a rooster crowed. And there's in another gospel, it says that once the rooster crowed, that Peter remembered that what Jesus had said, and he started weeping. And Peter was one of Jesus's main dudes. And he denied him. He said, I don't know him. That's not my friend. Don't talk to me about him. I don't know him. He just didn't want to get in trouble. Now, Jesus was in a different place at this time, in this situation, in this story. But Jesus knew, and Peter knew that Jesus knew that this was going to happen. Now, I want us to fast forward because I think we can relate to this idea of, yes, we love Jesus and Jesus loves us, but we're in this process of growth. Now, here's the cool thing about growth. Growth is what we do, but it isn't who we are. What do I mean by that? Growth is not our identity, because our identity doesn't change, but we're growing into our identity. Growth is what we do, but it's not who we are. And Jesus gives us permission to grow into who we are. who you are is not going to change. That's amazing, because who you are is amazing, because God has said that, and he says it to be so. He says it because it's true. You're his child. That isn't going to change. Now, whether you and I believe that, well, that's the process of growth that I'm talking about. That's the permission to grow. You have permission to grow, meaning there's going to be days that you may doubt that. There's going to be days where you don't act like a child of God. There's going to be days that you don't feel or think like a child of God. Well, you know what? Let yourself off the hook. Remember that you live in a realm of truth and grace. Remember that you live in the realm of Jesus, because John 1 says that Jesus is full of truth and grace. Let yourself off the hook. You have permission to grow. Meaning you don't have to beat yourself up every time you mess up, or every time you struggle with fear or anxiety or loneliness or anything like that, pride, all of those things. You can let yourself off the hook. And you know what? This is what you can say. God, this is where I'm at in my journey, and thank you for allowing me to grow. Thank you for allowing me to grow, God. Thank you for allowing me to become who you say I am. Thank you for allowing me to walk with you and experience you in ways that I never have known or never would have imagined before. You and I get that privilege of growth. And growth really only happens through grace. You can't grow if you don't understand that you're in a realm of grace, which gives you the permission to grow. Now, I want to fast forward to a scene. John, same book, chapter 21, verse 15. This is after Jesus had resurrected from the grave. And Jesus comes to Peter. The resurrected Jesus comes to Peter. This is what happens. Verse 15, when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord. You know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. He said to him in a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord. You know that I love you. He said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. This he said to show by what kind of death he was going to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, follow me. Check it out. Check out Jesus' faithfulness to Peter. Jesus' love and compassion towards Peter never changed. He knew that Peter would mess up. He knew that Peter would drop the ball. He knew that Peter is in a process of growth. And Jesus gave Peter and the rest of the disciples and the rest of the men and women that were in that time who knew Jesus, who followed Jesus, and he gives us, me and you, the permission to grow, meaning he's okay with our mistakes. He's okay with our doubts. He's okay with our struggles and our emotions and our beliefs. He's okay with that. Why? Well, he knows his love is greater. He knows that his love is what we need. He's with us in it. He's always faithful to us. And Jesus shows that to Peter. After he resurrected from the grave, he appeared to Peter, and Peter ran out to him. And then they had this discussion. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Why do you keep asking me? And I think it really wasn't because Jesus was unsure. It really wasn't because Jesus was unsure. It was actually to remind Peter that Peter really did love Jesus. Because when you and I mess up sometimes, when you and I doubt God, when you and I struggle to trust where he has us in life, when you and I struggle to trust him in the season that we're in, whether we're in quarantine, shelter at place or shelter at home, or we're just in another season of life and we're struggling to really believe that God has his best intentions for us, you know that, right? You know that feeling, right? When we're in that moment, Jesus is wanting to remind us, hey, you are who I say you are. Always. Always. You love me. I know you love me. You love me. You love me. Yes, I do. Yes, I do love you. Yes, I do love you. You see, it really wasn't for Jesus. It was really for Peter. Because Peter's the one who needed reminding. And so today, I want to give you the permission to grow as God gives me the permission to grow. And we can grow in our doubts. We can grow in our struggles. We can grow in all these things. But the end result is going to be the same. We're going to come to the conclusion that Jesus loves us so much that we're compelled to love him back. That's awesome. That's really awesome. So I'm looking forward to the next time that we get together in the next episode, the next part of Quarantine Life. But I want you to know today and for the rest of the week, hey, you have permission to grow. You have real permission to grow.